Hey everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of the Into the Rift podcast, a Riftbound TCG podcast hosted by myself, Alex Coccia, and of course, my good friend and the best of Teemo in Europe, Joe Curley. Joe, look at that. The card is on the screen. The Teemo hat is there. Joe, congratulations on your amazing run. Best of Teemo in Bologna. How does it feel, my man? Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, man. It's very surreal. I honestly hadn't got to compete in much Riftbound at all. I think this was this was my first tournament for Riftbound. So I was confident, possibly overconfident coming into it, as some of my friends might tell you. It was such a fun weekend. It was, if anything, Alex, that I learned is this game is brilliant. It is difficult, and these tournaments are draining. I'm usually on the broadcasting side of things, but let me tell you, I'm absolutely pooped. Like, I finished playing 48 hours ago, and I think I've had a headache ever since. It was such a slog. It was so much fun. I had so many intense matches. It was awesome, though. I had such a good experience. Like, honestly, the diversity of decks I played against, the quality of opponent, it was all just so much fun. And the brilliant thing is though, even though I had such a good run, I know that I could have done so much better, right? With just a few different plays, I really believe that the deck is good enough to win the whole tournament. I think people are going to find out that it's got extremely good matchups into like the Ezreal deck that won the whole thing, for example. So I actually think, if anything, I was almost a week too early with Teemo, right? Now that Ezreal's everywhere, I was telling everyone before the tournament, Ezreal's my best matchup. So I'm really excited to see if anybody picks the deck up for Vegas this weekend. I'm going to be rooting for the Teemos, that's for sure.
I love the fact that Joe comes on the pod and the first thing he says is, I could have done better. I only got the best of Teemo, but I could have done better. My man, you absolutely crushed it. And like, even on the stream, I was so happy you wore the hat. I was like, please wear the hat on the stream. Please wear the hat. You looked absolutely remarkable wearing the hat on stream and everything like that. But like, honestly, like obviously playing so many games, and the games are so long as they are, against a caliber of player that like you can't like just scrim against often, right? Like you don't just go onto TCG Arena and play against someone who, I mean, ultimately you lost your matchup against someone who top forward. Like you're talking about very, very talented players. But yeah, dude, like walk us through the experience. In particular, how was it like being on camera? Did it add significant stress to you? Like I thought you handled it amazing.
So I've played on camera a lot, which is definitely to my advantage on my own stream. Also, I've been on stream for a couple of Disney Arcana Challenge events, but it was definitely, I think at that point in the tournament, it was like the second round of day 2. I went into that tournament, to that stream match with like a lot of energy, feeling really good. And let me tell you, I left that match so flustered, like I didn't even realize, but when I got to the next table, I was all over the place. I couldn't find my phone. I didn't know where I was supposed to go. I sat down and like I just said to my opponent, like I'm kind of all over the place. My match was being shown on the stream, like quite far away, but I was paranoid that he might be able to see it. So I was like, can we swap places? I played terribly the next game. Fortunately managed to like claw it back, but it was exhausting. Like the extra focus that you have when you're on stream, I think is definitely there because obviously you're always trying to make sure that you're doing everything properly, but I was extremely focused on playing exceptionally clean. And I just mean like with making sure I don't do anything dodgy, right? Like I don't want to be getting a bad reputation for myself. I want to be playing the cleanest possible game. Worth noting as well, the playmat that you play on was really tiny, which didn't help on the stream table. I think that's definitely something that will probably be improved for the future. That kind of just adds to like that extra pressure. And I was in my most uncomfortable matchup. I think probably what cost me this tournament was that I didn't practice enough into Irelia. I mean, I played against it a lot. Most of my testing was low quality testing. I just played on TCG Arena and got lots of reps in. And I think ultimately that cost me, that I didn't like have some, if I had like a one match against a really good Irelia player where I was specifically practicing, I think it could have been a lot different. Like I literally in the stream match on game 2 calculated Defiant Dance, and then they play the Defiant Dance and I'm totally caught off guard by the fact that it can target my base, which just shows you that like, okay, I did really good this weekend, but I still had a lot to learn. Like there's a really silly mistake overlooking and misunderstanding how a card works, and I almost totally threw the game. Ultimately, it went to time in game 3. They didn't show it on stream, and I lost to a sneaky deckhand in a power nexus. And it was, to be fair, it was the fair result. My opponent deserved the game. I think it's fair to say that I used up the majority of the clock. I think my pace of play definitely could have been better in that particular case, but credit to my opponent. They put me in so many awkward spots. It was a great experience overall, Alex. I had so much fun. And the fact that I'm leaving the tournament knowing that I could do better, I think is what I'm loving about Riftbound as well so much. Like, the skill expression is so high. You see Alan, who we talked about Alan on the podcast before, and I sort of said to you, like, I think he was the best player in Houston. If it wasn't for that missed trigger on Arena's Greatest, I think he had that tournament. And then he runs it back in Bologna and just goes undefeated. Like, in Alan's testing group, there was 3 of the top 8 were in the same testing group. I think Randy, Priz and Alan are all in the same testing group. So it just shows you that, like, the game is very skill intensive, and I think that's so good for a card game. It's exactly what you want.
Absolutely. And we will be talking about your deck momentarily and some of the decks from the top 8 to give you a bit of an idea. But before we do that, any closing thoughts on the general experience of Bologna, the idea of going to a regional? Like, is it something that you would recommend for Riftbound players listening? Because we have a whole bunch that have been announced. We have, one in Vancouver. We have Hartford. Obviously, there is the upcoming one in Vegas, although I believe that's sold out, obviously, at this point. But, like, how was the overall experience, the vibe? How were the side events? I know you were busy playing the main event, but, like, what was going on around you? Is there any kind of advice or tips you'd like to provide?
Okay, best thing about Bologna event compared to other TCG events, there was free water. Let me tell you, that sounds like something small, but absolutely brilliant. I think every event that I now go to, I want free water. It was so good. The venue food was also unbelievable. That's not the most important stuff. You're in Italy, you would expect it, right? But it was just a really nice vibe in the whole place, Alex. We did like a Super Nexus night on the Friday. Admittedly, there were some issues with the tournament platform which caused some delays, which I wasn't too surprised to see. It's a similar sort of platform that we have to Disney Lorcana, and it's improving, but there's definitely some issues. So with delays and such, but the Super Nexus night vibe was great when you actually sat down playing. They were like handing out free gifts, like people got Teemo hats and Tibbers hats. In the last round, they were handing out like League of Legends statues to people, which I think are worth like a few hundred, and just giving these away. So that was really awesome. There was a really nice like just free play area, which I chilled most of the day on Friday. I decided not to do side events. There was very big queues for them. People were hunting the tickets. There was a black market for tickets. They were going for like, I don't know, like for 2 tickets, it was like 50 quid for like 2 tickets or something like this. Like, it was a lot like of not dodgy stuff, but like black market, like we jokingly call it, where people are buying tickets because the metal cards were selling for like 1,000 for like the not super popular ones. And so people were able to make quite a lot of money. I know that a lot of people were sort of like grinding the 2v2 event in particular because that got the most tickets. I didn't actually do any side events apart from the Super Nexus night, but I just really enjoyed being in the venue Friday, just chilling, enjoying the experience. I did a creator sealed, which was really fun. Just got to meet some of the local Italians in particular at that. So I would definitely recommend it. I think even if you're going on the admission to just do side events, you can have a great time. It was a brilliant event, and the best thing about the main event, Alex, was the deck diversity. It was just phenomenal. I think on day 1, I played against 8 different legends. Like, what more could you possibly ask for, right? I played against an Ornn because I didn't have a buy. I played against Irelia, which I lost round 2. I played against a Azir rather. I played against Annie. I played against one Draven. I played against an Ahri. It was so awesome. And the thing is, right, like, that is really testing you as a player. Like, if I didn't know my Ahri matchup, I would have got absolutely cooked. But because I put quite a lot of work in, and Ahri was a matchup which I got to play quite a bit, I managed to sort of find the line. So it was just a brilliant experience, Alex. I will say there was some less good things which I think need to be worked on. I think the overtime situation in Riftbound needs a rethink. I actually wouldn't be that surprised if Riftbound ends up being a best of one game, which is going to be controversial, but it is really hard to finish games sometimes. Some people will say, well, just play quicker. Everyone, like, overtime is going on everywhere. There's like 30 minutes overtime every single round. It's really, really difficult to finish the games on time for most decks. But yeah, it was great. There was also some unfortunate judge calls. For example, I'll give you the one which almost sort of ruined my whole weekend. And big credit to the judges. They're doing their best job. But I think that there's definitely some things which need to be fixed. So the ruling that I was given, which I appealed, and I still am very unhappy about the result. My opponent moved into Candlelit Sanctum. They put one card on the bottom of their deck, and they put one card into their hand. Fortunately, if you've watched my YouTube channel, you'll know that I've been cheated against in the past, and I was being very vigilant. Now, my opponent might not have meant to do this. I think it's something that you can easily do. But of course, I call the judge. And the ruling is because I wasn't convinced the card they said was the card, that a random card should be shuffled from their hand and placed back on top of the deck, which I appealed because in this position, if my opponent had a falling star, they'd already falling starred me once, which I played around with my Edge of Night. If they had another falling star, I literally lose the game on the spot. And it was, I think, round 7. I was 5-1 at the time. Fortunately, the falling star never came and I was able to win that. But I think that was definitely a very surprising ruling, right? Like if you're looking at Candlelit Sanctum, you get to look 2 cards deep into your deck. I don't think it's an adequate ruling that a random card is put back. It should be a couple of things. It should either be a game loss, which I think, honestly, probably if you're adding an extra card into your hand when you're not supposed to, probably it should be a game loss. I'm not an expert on these things. But what the other people in the room sort of suggested to me should have been the case was that like I get to look at my opponent's hand and choose which one goes on the bottom. Now, obviously with Riftbound, that's slightly problematic because that information in hand is very valuable. But ultimately, what certainly should not have happened is I certainly should not have been put in a position where I was put at a disadvantage by someone making a mistake, right? Which was ultimately what could have happened. So that was definitely a sour note. There was a couple of instances, like someone else played a punch first and then added it back to their hand. Fortunately, this didn't matter as well, but I would just recommend, like, if you're going to these events, like, I think there was probably a lot of dodgy stuff happening in the room, whether intentional or not. Just try and keep your wits about you. Try and pay attention to what your opponent's doing. And of course, really try and focus on making sure that you are not doing anything yourself, because it's definitely easy to make mistakes. But overall, great experience. Really, really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to try and run it back and do even better. I'm kind of sad I'm not going to Vegas. I'm actually very sad I'm not going to Vegas. It was a great experience, Alex. Absolutely loved it.
There is so much I want to ask you about there, but at the same time, we do have to move on eventually to your deck, the work that you've done to design the deck, and your kind of the ins and outs that everyone wants to know about how to play this fantastic Teemo deck, and of course, the top 8. But you touched on a lot of very important things. First of all, pace of play. When I'm playing in locals, despite the fact that I try to play as quickly as possible, and even the people I'm with, generally speaking, play as fast as they can, it feels like if you don't 2-0 somebody, you're going to time. Like, it's just like the way it feels like it is often. So I wouldn't be surprised if significant rule changes do apply to Riftbound in order to make it a faster playing game. And I think that this has been something a lot of people have mentioned, and I feel like I've seen a lot of suggestions. I saw one, I believe, on X where someone said, like, when maybe there's another type of token where like you are tapped out of energy and you're unable to play, you can put the token on like in between the battlefields, illustrating that like you're done and your opponent can finish their turn, and allow you to activate and kind of do the first stage of your setup prior to being complete. It was just something I saw. I don't know, like from a rules perspective, that's a great idea, but it was something that someone pitched in order to kind of like cut that like 15, 20 seconds out of every turn where people are activating and doing all that stuff, right? But at the same time, there's a reason why ABCD is so important. You want to be tracking, as you said, is my opponent like drawing the correct number of cards? Are they channeling the right number of cards? Have they done anything dodgy, as you like to say? And when you're playing competitively, and like, it's easy at locals, like who really cares, right? Like you're playing for fun, you're getting the reps in. And for the most part, I don't know about your locals, but my locals, everyone is friends. Like we've learned to like, kind of enjoy each other's company. We're not looking to shorthand each other with shady plays. But unfortunately, at those types of events where there are metal cards on the line and where there are tickets on the line, as you're saying, are selling for a decent amount of money, unfortunately, people will take those advantages. And even like, I know from Lorcana, like you played against someone on stream who literally like sleight of handed a card that was detrimental to your deck onto the top of their deck and then drew it, right? So like you've been cheated against live on stream in Lorcana. So absolutely, it's super important you stay vigilant from that.
Also, Alex, worth pointing out, I've also, on my own Lorcana streams, which I've done many of, there's been a couple of instances where I've done something wrong myself accidentally. So it's not just about watching your opponent, it's also just about being really cautious of what you do. Like I've had to learn sort of the hard way. I never would have known if there wasn't a camera and 100 YouTube comments and Reddit posts about what I'd done, right? So it's not just about watching your opponent. That's really important at these high stakes, but also just really being extremely careful. So one thing I made really sure to do, Alex, was I hadn't had any reps playing this deck with paper cards. So on the Friday, I didn't do a side event. I just focused on just getting lots of reps in. I played against loads of friends. I probably played like 25 games, just getting my reps in, getting used to readying all my runes and paying power costs, because that is really important. We saw Savage in Houston, who's a player I've got a lot of respect for. He had this moment or several moments where he played the showstopper and didn't pay a power cost. And I just knew, as Savage is someone I know, that this is someone who plays 99% of their games on a simulator, right? And actually getting those physical reps in with paper cards is really important to help alleviate those mistakes. And actually, it's really important, therefore, for your own skill, because you don't want to be spending time and energy thinking about doing everything properly, right? It just needs to be second nature, and then you can focus on the game. So definitely focus on what your opponent's doing, but also really make sure that you're doing everything you need to be as well, because it's really easy to slip up and overlook like a power cost or something if you're not careful.
Yeah, and of course, I do think that intent is important as well. Like making an error and then, just out of a pure accident, having a judge say like, hey, you forgot to put the power under and put it like that's an error. Like it happens, right? Like people are human beings and they make mistakes, especially when like you're on camera or there's more added pressure or it's a high stakes game. Like we're human beings, right? But a consistent pattern of cheating though, is something that obviously needs to, you need to be cognizant of, because like, for instance, I go back to that clip of you and Lorcana. If anybody's interested, I'll put that video is pretty interesting to see. I'll put it in the description for people interested in watching, because you break it down. I couldn't believe it was on stream and the guy cheated, sleight of hand. But you almost wonder, that person who did that to you on camera, on stream, buddy, I bet you they did that all tournament long. Like, I bet you that's a learned behavior that they're doing very consistently. And that is not good. A small mistake of like you forgot to pay your power and the judge lets you know or your opponent lets you know, right? Like that's one thing, but like sleight of hand onto like top decking stuff and adding cards to your hand, that's not cool. And there's no place for that in card games.
The one other one which was bizarre was my opponent. I managed to beat a Draven miraculously game 3 by playing 2 Nocturnes from hand, and as I'm winning the game with my switcheroo, they're like, no, this Nocturne wasn't at the battlefield, it was at the base. Unfortunately, there was a judge right next to me and was like, well, I think if I came over and I thought Nocturne was at the battlefield, I would expect if it was at the base, it'd be much further behind. So that was definitely a bit of a downside of the event, that there was a few of those sort of moments of people are obviously, it's high stakes, of course it is. But just make sure you call a judge. That's all I would recommend. Just call a judge. Don't be afraid to call a judge at any point. That's what they're there for, right? And calling a judge is not a sign of disrespect to your opponent. It's actually, judges are there to keep everybody safe, keep the game fair. If you have any doubts at all, call a judge. And if you don't like what the judge rules, appeal. Absolutely appeal. It's really important, because there was a lot of rulings over the weekend that I heard about which got appealed and fixed. So remember, you always have a right to appeal a judge ruling if you don't agree with it.
And on the note of judge ruling, like when I was doing my skirmishes, something that came up a couple times where people were playing and not really respecting the difference between a spell, a reaction, and an action. That is something, and how focus gets passed between players and how those keywords interact with focus. And so like if my opponent was doing something, I'm like, yeah, that's not cool. I wasn't disrespectful. I was just like, you know what? I'm not sure if that's how that works. And I would pretend like I wasn't sure and that I was asking the question of the judge. I'm like, hey, judge, is this how this card works with focus being the way it is? And they'd be like, no, they can't play that right now. Like it has to be a reaction speed or whatever. I liked framing it as in I'm asking the question. I'm not accusing my opponent, which I think can go a long way as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I got to say, Alex, as well, like there was a couple instances over the weekend where people can try and take advantage of the sort of focus system as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So I honestly think there was a couple of moments where I probably wasn't confident enough on if I was supposed to have initiative or not. And it's definitely something I've realized I need to work on myself. So definitely just try and familiarize yourself as much with those rulings as you can so that you can go in being confident. It's a really difficult game. It's a brilliant game. There's huge skill involved. And just, again, biggest advice is call a judge if in doubt about anything and just try and pay attention, not only to what your opponent's doing, but also what you're doing yourself. Also, pace of play is a really difficult issue to solve in Riftbound. The biggest thing I can recommend is just talking to your opponent if you feel like your opponent's taking too long. As a couple of times my opponent said it to me over the weekend, like, I think you need to make a play. We've got this amount of time on the clock, right? That sort of thing. Nothing wrong with that. Call a judge over if you're concerned as well. Because it definitely happens. Clock is a huge part of Riftbound as it stands. The overtime situation, I think, needs a really big look, Alex. I think turn 0 is a huge disadvantage. Is sort of my conclusion from the weekend. So I definitely think overtime needs to. I think you're always going to have an advantage for turn 0, but I actually think it's a disadvantage as turn 0. I think it's too much right now. I almost wonder if there needs to be a turn 4 where if it would be your turn 4 and you're holding a battlefield, you just get the point for holding before the game ends. Something like that to just balance it a bit more, because at the moment, turn 0 is such a big disadvantage. And what that's going to lead to inevitably is it is going to inevitably lead to people intentionally playing slower to get themselves in a favorable position. It's literally how the game is sort of designed. Like people are going to sideboard for a short game 3, all that sort of stuff. It's unavoidable, but I think that maybe it could be balanced better. And overall, I think the overtime and the time situation is a big problem for Riftbound right now. And I would imagine that something has to change there in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this makes me super excited to go to Vegas. I'll be in Vegas. I'll be there Saturday and Sunday. I'm not doing the main event. We talked about it before. I didn't get into the main event, so I'll just be doing side events and just general whatever, right? I'm actually looking forward to even just watching what's going on and just kind of taking in the event. And hopefully you and I get a chance to go to an event together, despite the fact we are separated by a massive body of water, but hopefully at some point we get the opportunity to play. Because you and I we have met in person in New York City for a Marvel Snap event. It was actually so much fun. Spess, he's such an awesome dude. But anyhow, it's, I think, about time we finally break down the Teemo deck, because this is a deck a lot of people are going to want to hear your take on. So let's talk about the best of Teemo for Bologna. Spessy, talk us through everything. We usually even skip the battlefields. Let's not even skip the battlefields. Talk about the battlefields because they are important here, and then take us through each card. And for the audio listeners, I would even appreciate if you actually read out the deck, because this is a beauty and people are going to want to hear from the best of Teemo himself.
Yeah, so a lot of people that know me from other card games will know me as a deck builder more than a player. Deck building is definitely the thing I'm most passionate about. In Gwent the Witcher card game, I was a commentator mainly, but I was also definitely not a pro player, but I did help a lot of pro players prep decks for tournaments. So deck building is something I'm really passionate about. And this best of prizing, immediately for me, I was like, this is my kind of tournament setting, right? What I like to do is I like to play off-meta stuff and try and make it as competitive as possible. So I was a big believer in Teemo in set 1. When I played Teemo, I was particularly a big fan of the chosen champion, Teemo Scout. I played with my good friend Jan Moyen, who actually recently joined Ravensburger Disney Arcana game design team. He's a brilliant, brilliant player. And every time I would play Teemo against him, on my very first turn, I would say, that's why Teemo is the best champion in the game. I love aggro decks, and Teemo Scout is the only 2-cost champion in Riftbound still that doesn't have a power cost. And that means every single time with this deck, when you're at 2 runes on your first turn, I just play Teemo. That might not sound that impressive. He's a 1-might guy. Why do you care? Well, scoring this guaranteed point or having this guaranteed curve gives you so much value, right? You're trying to play quick. You need to score as many points as quickly as possible. So getting a body on the board, getting something into the battlefield is just brilliant. But what's also important to recognize is the amount of deck building freedom that gives you. Suddenly, you don't have to worry about how many 2-drops you play, right? Like if you're playing an aggro deck, you need to play a card on your very first turn. So how many 2-drops are you going to play? Are you going to play like 10, 11, 12? Even if you play 12 2-drops in Riftbound, the way the mulligan works, you are still going to miss a 2-drop quite often. Let me tell you, Alex, I did not miss a 2-drop one time in the whole weekend, and I played the same card every single time on turn 1 when going first, and it was Teemo Scout. The other thing that's brilliant about Teemo Scout in the current format is against Draven, he is brilliant at avoiding combat as well, because you move him in, and then the following turn, you just pay 1 with your legend ability, exerting it, and add Teemo back to hand. What's also brilliant about that is your opponent knows you have Teemo in hand, and very often the first card you're going to be hiding with this deck is going to be the Edge of Night. I probably also had particularly extra value from this because it's like surprise value, right? The amount of times my opponents would falling star me and I just reveal the Edge of Night to keep my unit alive was through the roof. And what Edge of Night also gives you in terms of tempo is even if your unit is removed, you get +2, you maybe like force out an extra combat trick. The Edge of Night then is going to be at your base, ready to attach to something later on. And the synergy that Edge of Night has with the drop border in particular is so fascinating. So drop border is the main card which the other Teemo player who did really well wasn't playing. When you play me, if you control 2 or more gear, ready me. So it's 4 energy, 4 might, and it comes in ready all the time. Absolutely unbelievable card. This card totally carried me against Annie. It won me so many games where I would just go double drop border for 8 runes, for example. Brilliant. Pit Crew was a card which totally caught the eye when watching the Chinese decks, Chinese tournaments rather. And Pit Crew, when you play a gear ready me, has the most broken combo in the deck with the Cull, which is a 1-cost equipment. When I conquer, play a gold gear token exhausted. Blevins from Turnham Sideways, who I got to hang out with a lot this weekend, was calling it build your own Lucian, right? The Pit Crew and the Cull, you move into a battlefield, you score, you generate a gold, already unbelievable, but then the Pit Crew readies and you move back to the base. And then if you play like another gear, whether it's like a Card Sharp, whether it's the Edge of Night, whether it's a Seal, your Pit Crew readies again and you can go back into the other battlefield, score, get more gold. So the Pit Crew is probably the best card in the deck with the Cull, but the drop border is also not to be trifled with like this equipment synergy. And the last card I want to talk about in terms of the equipment synergy, Alex, is my favorite card in the deck, the Pickpocket, which I was really happy to see Alan also had a Pickpocket in the sideboard. There was also a Viktor deck in the top 8, which had the full play set of Pickpockets. This was a shoe-in on my sideboard from the moment I saw the card. But then in the last week, I actually just decided it was good enough to play it in the main deck. The thing that's so good about the Pickpocket is you can disrupt your opponent, removing their gold or their seals while developing your own gold. And for a tempo, for an aggro deck, it's just the most unbelievably good card in specific matchups. Okay, it was bad against Irelia, like on my stream game. Of course, I sideboarded it, all 3 of them out immediately. But even when it's bad, it's just a 3-might guy for 3. It's really not terrible, right? Brilliant, brilliant card. And Nocturne as well, Alex, my favorite card from set 1. I knew immediately when I saw Called Shot that I was going to be playing a Nocturne deck. The ganking should not be underestimated on this card. The ability to play Nocturne in your opponent's turn won me a huge match against Draven in game 3 where my opponent moves in and I just had 3 runes open. I had 2 for a Rebuke and 1 for a stack deck which hit the Nocturne. I didn't even need the Rebuke at that point because I just take out my opponent's Kai'Sa when they weren't expecting it. So Yeah. Overall, the deck, I think it's super optimized, super clean. Probably one thing I would change about it though, Alex, which is switcheroo. So I had one switcheroo in the main and one on the side. I think I would probably change that. Worth noting as well, there's a slight error in this deck list, which is my own fault because I tweeted out an old version of it. I swapped out one of these factory recalls for a hard bargain. I played 2 factory recall and 2 hard bargain, which was like a last minute decision. Definitely the correct decision there. Hard bargain really came in clutch at many moments. But yeah, I think this second switcheroo on the sideboard, I think I would be quite tempted, honestly, Alex, to just put the third rebuke on the sideboard. I put the third fight or flight on the sideboard, and I think I would probably just put the third rebuke on the sideboard if I was to play again. Also, like the ganking boots is another card I tested a lot and was very close to making the cut. I know the other Teemo player had that. But the one game I lost all weekend with Arena's Greatest was my winning in for Euros, which unfortunately I just missed out on, and I had a dead switcheroo in hand, and probably a sideboarding issue. Maybe that all comes back to the deck build, right? Like I think I got the deck pretty much spot on, but it just shows you that even that one card difference, that one card decision can really be the difference. So probably that was the one mistake I made. I forgot to even talk about the other battlefields, right? Arena's Greatest, for me, the best battlefield in the game. I think it's absolutely absurdly good. Again, I didn't lose a game on it all weekend until the penultimate round. Candlelit Sanctum's just my go first battlefield. Great synergy with Nocturne. Very bad against Irelia, as I found out. Very bad against Irelia. They just find all their Defiant Dances. So that's something to look out for. And then Power Nexus, which started the weekend as my favorite battlefield. And I think it might now be my least favorite battlefield because of how it interacts with overtime. It was brilliant for me, don't get me wrong. But seeing my opponent's sneaky deck can by Power Nexus in the stream match, which they didn't show, was quite heartbreaking. I actually still almost won that game. I basically needed 1 extra purple rune because I couldn't play my purple seal, but I digress. But there was my very last turn of the tournament was holding with Power Nexus, which allowed me to secure a tie against Kaiser. So Power Nexus is a really, really good battlefield when going second because suddenly your opponent has to respect you so much more. Usually, right, if you're 3 points behind, you have to answer their stuff. Suddenly with Power Nexus, it gives you opportunities where you just can ignore your opponent. You go all in on Power Nexus and they have to respect you so much more. Even if it doesn't win you the game, it just means that your opponent has to play the game so much more differently and they have to respect you so much more. So Power Nexus is great. Worth noting, you cannot actually float the runes for Power Nexus, which is something I found out during the tournament because basically your rune pool is like wiped in the draw step or something like this, the judge explained to me. So you cannot float your runes to pay for Power Nexus. So that's worth noting. But Power Nexus was absolutely brilliant for me, but it's definitely something you need to be really cautious of with how it interacts with overtime because things can get quite dodgy quite quickly with that extra point you can get from it in those spots.
There's a couple things I absolutely need to say. First of all, I love the deck, and I was one of the very few people on this planet that was privy to this deck list prior to you going. I mean, we joked about, like, what's Joe bringing to Bologna? And, like, to me, it was obvious you're going to bring Teemo, but I guess we got to leave it suspenseful. But what I want to say is, like, when you look at a deck like this, some of these interactions almost appear obvious when you're just looking at a deck. But the amount of work Joe did to figure out, build, and compile these synergies so that they worked exactly like he expected. Dude, you've been just nonstop grinding for 3 weeks, playing nonstop Riftbound. And I think that's why you came to this drop border synergy because you were able to test it thoroughly, figure it out, and be like, yes, this is playing exactly as I want it to. Card Sharp is not a card that you see very often, but you tested it, you grinded the games, and you figured out that interaction. Like, I'm just saying that, like, it was a tremendous amount of effort that I don't think you want to say out loud, but I'm going to say for you. You put in a tremendous amount of effort of not just crafting a deck, but also taking it through its paces for weeks in advance to ensure that the synergies were worth pulling off. Like, you put the work in and it shows through in what is a very creative deck. One thing else I want to say, Pickpocket. We actually had a conversation about Pickpocket prior to you going to Bologna. It was almost cut. And then yet, now, in seeing how Bologna played out, a major European championship for Riftbound, Pickpocket, no kidding that your Ezreal matchup was favorable. When you have something like Pickpocket, those seals are just blowing up all over the place.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Alex. I think, honestly, I arrived at this deck like 3 weeks ago or so, and when I the pit crew was the part I was missing, and I watched the Chinese region, I was like, oh, that's what I've been missing. I was trying like Fizz and Sprite Call, and as soon as I sort of had the pit crew, the rest of the deck just sort of came together. I've got to say, I didn't actually practice much the 2 weeks prior to the event. I had some visa issues, which I fortunately managed to solve, but I was very close to not being able to travel. And I do think that, if I'd had a bit more testing in that 2 week period, I probably could have done a little bit better, because I think the deck, and I'm not surprised by this, I think the deck is better than I am. I think I'm good at Riftbound, but what I love is that I know that I could get so much better. That's what I love about card games. That's what made me fall in love with my first card game, Gwent, where like I was good, but the very best players were so much better than me. And I actually feel the same with Riftbound, right? Like I'm good, but I know that in Alan's hands, for example, this deck was plenty good enough to win the whole tournament. I really believe it. I think it's an absolutely brilliant deck. If you like aggro, I think that this is probably the best aggro deck in the format. I think it's just got so much legs. I will mention, you're going to have games where you brick and the deck feels terrible, but then you're also just going to have games where you find the pit crew into Cull. I actually, at the hotel lobby at about 3 a.m. on Monday morning, Randy walked into the tournament who had just finished the top 8. We'd both, been enjoying ourselves out in Bologna, having a few drinks and whatnot. And we had a game, and I managed to hit the triple nocturne after about 3 turns against him. And I think he went to bed after that. I think he'd had enough. Like, you'll have your high roller games, but you're also therefore also going to have your games where the deck feels a little bit rubbish. It's a really fun deck to play. Very much you have to be very careful with your sequencing and your decisions on those first few turns in particular. If you have a bad first few turns, it's going to snowball from there. And similarly, if you can start off hot, you put so much pressure on your opponent by just scoring early points that you just make them answer so many questions, and you can just close the game out with the Watcher very often.
And before we move on, did you want to make any comparisons between your deck and the other Teemo deck that finished top 128 and did very well as well? Like, this was basically the second best of Teemo, if you want to put it in that way. Obviously a different shell, a different approach. You don't see the nocturnes and the general strategy that you're utilizing, but this might be more along the lines of what people might have expected from Teemo going into the tournament. Do you want to touch on what you see here?
Yeah, big shout out to Gabachi. They pushed me all the way. We were neck and neck the whole time. I got a tie in the last round. They lost their last round. We both played against Coccia. They did say that they would prefer my deck. When I sort of heard they weren't playing the drop board, I was like, oh, good news for me. So that their deck, and also no Nocturne. These are two of my like most aggressive cards. I think the difference is that my deck is more polarized towards aggro and tempo. I haven't even told you what the deck's called yet, Alex. You're going to love it. It's called Teempo. Teempo. It's like tempo.
That's
Teemo.
Genius. I get it. You don't have to explain to me, but I get it. That's a brilliant name.
And this list is a little bit slower, but it's got some really awesome things going on. It's more control focused. Obviously a really, really good deck. It did so well. This Ornn is fascinating with Deflect 2. There's the Boots, which I think is one of the main cards I could have gone for. I think there's 2 Ride the Winds, or maybe even a third in the sideboard. So it's a little bit more slow. It's not going to be, as good into Ezreal, for example. So I think it's definitely fair to say that like the version I played is probably the more optimized list. I think my friend Kabachi would agree with that in a sense, but I think they probably also played a bit better than me in the weekend. I think my pickpockets, Alex, let me tell you, I played against a Jinx player who finished second in Houston. I felt so bad when I was pickpocketing their purple seals. I felt like they were outplaying me left, right, and center, but my deck just carried me through. So big shout out to Kabachi though. Awesome deck, awesome experience. Really, really loved the tournament, and I loved Teemo. And I know a lot of people have already started playing it and have found that, this deck's really good against Ezreal, which I knew for sure I wanted to play against some Ezreals. I was really hoping to get Alan at some point. on stream and do some pickpockets on purple seals, but there's always another time, I suppose.
All right, Joe, let's talk about the general meta of Bologna. We're going to do a quick breakdown. We'll do the top 8, and then we're, of course, going to showcase some of the top 8 decks as well. There was like multiple Dravens, so we're going to do the top performing Draven, for instance, top performing Ezreal, which won the tournament from Alan. Long story short, we do have a 15% Draven meta share, followed by Coccia at 11%, Irelia at 9%, Ezreal at 5%. Those were the top 4. I don't think there's any surprises there. Those are the ones that you would expect most competitive players would be bringing. But what is most surprising, and precisely what we've been talking about forever, is that these medal cards and these prizes do make it so that more people are willing to take shots at other particular legends. And that's fantastic. That's exactly what you want to see. And it creates a much more diverse meta than expected, which would explain why you, during your graceful rise towards best of Teemo, you were facing so many different players, including an Ari and stuff like that, and Ornn. That's all because of those medal cards. So every single legend was represented, which is great to see. And even then, right, Garen still had 15 players, Lee Sin, Leona, 20 and 19 respectively. Teemo, 27, 2% of the overall meta.
It's crazy, it's so low.
Yeah.
I was so sure it was like, I was looking at the China results, I was like, how is it so low? It was like, it's just a purple deck. It's got to be good, right? It's purple, but there we are. It worked for me. Like, I couldn't believe it was so low, but happy days. But it was awesome, Alex. Like, having like all of this diversity, like, yeah, okay, you could argue that it's artificially created, but it doesn't actually matter if it leads to a brilliant experience for everybody, right? Like, and it really tests you as a player, right? Like my matches against Ari, if I hadn't done testing against Ari, I 100% would have lost. But I sort of recognized what I needed to do to stop them popping off, which was basically keep Sona out of the battlefield at all costs. So it was an absolutely brilliantly diverse meta, something I've never seen in a card game like it. Like, absolutely unbelievable. You really couldn't ask for much more than this.
And a major fall from grace, in my opinion, is Master Yi at 2%, 28 people there. And it's crazy because this was a deck that was winning tournaments prior. So yeah, a very healthy meta, which is fantastic. And then we go to our top 8. We did have Alan finishing number 1 as Ezreal. That was an absolutely fantastic result from Alan. We did have multiple Ezreals. We had a multiple Dravens, of course. Irelia, the Viktor, was an awesome control Viktor that like could have won it all. Like, it was a very, very close game. And of course, you do have the Misfortune in second place as well, which was remarkable. And it's the second time we've seen Misfortune, a dazzling Aurora version of Misfortune, do so tremendously well. So let's talk about the decks here. I think that we definitely got to start with Alan's top performing Ezreal coming in at number 1. This was an absolute banger deck, remarkable all the way through. And of course, the player, talking about, the deck can be good, but what a clean player. Like, when you watch Alan, it's like watching, like, who's the best football player on the planet right now? I don't know, Josh Allen throw a perfect pass. It's like watching, Sidney Crosby skate across the ice. Alan is like the equivalent of, like, when you're watching him play, you're like, this guy knows how to play card games. This is a clearly talented person piloting a deck that has been remarkably well crafted, and it was no surprise to me that Alan was successful. What do you think about the deck?
Yeah, Alan's also everything I hear about him is he just practices so hard, and it really shows, right? The Polish are so good at card games. I know this firsthand from Gwent, which is a Polish developer. Many of the best players were Polish, and it seems like Riftbound is going a similar way. There's an all Poland final, so big shout out to the Polish community, because I'm a big fan of Poland. It's one of my favorite countries, and I always enjoy seeing how passionate the Polish fans are. But yeah, Vex, I think, was the star of the show, Alex, right? The kind of card that slipped under the radar here. It's a 5 energy, 1 power, 5 might. Of course, when you're already playing purple seals, that purple power cost becomes significantly less expensive, particularly when you consider that the ability can reduce the power costs of some of your spells. While I'm in combat, friendly spells cost 1 energy and 1 power less to a minimum of 1 energy, and enemy spells cost 1 energy and 1 power more. So in other words, if you've got a Rebuke, which usually costs you 2 energy, 2 power, it's going to cost you 1 energy, 1 power. Quite unbelievable. Like, of course, it's while Vex is in combat. I actually haven't had an opportunity to watch back the finals just yet because of travel and whatnot, but Vex, I've heard, was the absolute star of the show, and I'm not surprised, actually. When I see this card, it makes so much sense in the Ezreal shell because you have to naturally play lots of these spells in an Ezreal deck. Things like Bellows Breath, things like the Frigid Touch, the Rebukes, the Smokescreen, which we know Alan loved as well in his Houston tournament as well. So really, really awesome to see. One thing that if you're looking to pick this deck up, you've got to be conscious of is you are going to go to time with this deck. I think Alan might have, from what I've heard as a rumor, is that he didn't go to time once. Don't know if that's true, just a rumor I heard. Trust me, you are not Alan. You are going to go to time with this deck. It's going to be a slogger. So something to definitely be conscious of. If you're looking to play this deck, you need to get a lot of practice in. It's going to be really difficult to play, I would imagine.
The thing that really stood out to me with this deck as well is it goes so counter to what you usually do in deck building in so many CCGs, where you're usually just playing play sets of things, right? You want the consistency. Yep. This is 1-ofs and 2-ofs everywhere. Literally everywhere. Like, you're running 1 of Mind Splitter, 1 of Thousand Tail Watcher, 2 of Rasa, right? Like, you got so, like, 1 Retreat. What? It's crazy how many 1-ofs there are. Now, of course, you got the sideboard as well, but even in the sideboard, you got 1 of Downwell, 1 of Dr. Mundo. It is a remarkable way to design a deck. And so what's your opinion on utilizing so many 1-ofs in a game where usually in TCGs, you want these consistent play sets?
Yeah, I think it really highlights how good Riftbound's deck building is, right? Like 40 card decks is very tight. I think also Cold Shot is a big factor with this. Like Cold Shot with Vex is quite unbelievable as well, right? You can basically pay no power for your Cold Shot with Vex. Like Vex, the Purple Seal, and Ezreal, you're just getting things so unbelievably cheap, and you're going to have so much filter, right? So that makes the 1-ofs more consistent in a way, right? You're more likely to see each card because you're going through your deck so much. And also in Riftbound, like having a 1-off Frigid Touch, having a 1-off Smokescreen, having a 1-off Morbid Return, which is not something I really expected to see in a competitive deck. It just gives you a lot of flexibility. Very interesting, though, to still see that there are some 3-ofs, right? Like the Ravenbloom Student with 3 Stupefies. I think it's a must in an Ezreal deck because you need to be targeting your opponent's units to get the Ezreal card draw effect. I also want to point out, Alex, one thing that I think is really important. This deck only plays 1 Ezreal, which I'm not surprised to see at all. When you've got a chosen champion, okay, yes, Ezreal's a great card, but when you've got a chosen champion, it always feels a bit weird to have another copy of it in the main deck, right? Like, when would you actually want to play the second Ezreal? And Alan seemingly just would rather use that slot on something else. So, awesome deck, awesome player. Really, really excited to see if he can continue this streak. Because, again, I think Houston was his to win, and it was that Arena's greatest trigger, which really cost him. And he's obviously been thinking about that a lot and has had a point to prove, and my goodness, he's done it. Going undefeated in like 15 rounds, unbelievable. Like, that is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, this is the first place deck, and as always, we will have the links in the description. It's kind of challenging to show all the cards on the screen at one time, especially when there's so many 1-ofs. Going to our second place performer, Miss Fortune. This was a dazzling Aurora Miss Fortune, and wow. For me, when I was watching these games, the thing that really stood out to me is Mind Splitter is ridiculous, because in the Viktor matchup, where obviously Call the Weak, Hidden Blade, there's so many ways for Viktor to have an advantage in this matchup, and yet Mind Splitter was blowing up the Viktor's hand in top 4 every single time. It was so heartbreaking for the Viktor player. These Mind Splitters were just soul crushing. And then after the Mind Splitter, you get your Volibear. You're like, whatever, right? Like, it's just wild what this deck can do. You could be down 6-7 points and still come back and win. Absolutely remarkable. What are your thoughts about Miss Fortune?
Yeah, I love how polarized the deck is, right? We talked about earlier with my Teemo build, how I tried to build it as aggressive as possible. this is sort of a similar concept with the polarization. Like, look at how few units there are, right? It's just the ones that they want to hit off Aurora, and that's it. I think this kind of deck wouldn't have worked in set 1, but I would imagine that Last Rites is sort of what enables this sort of strategy still to work, because you can play units from your discard potentially. So super fascinating. I also love the look of the one of Misfortune on the sideboard to change out your chosen champion in some matchups. That's super fascinating. Again, I haven't had an opportunity to watch the top 8 matches in too much depth just yet, but I'm really looking forward to doing so. And I can certainly see why this was the best Misfortune deck, with like just 3 Mind Splitters, 2 12-cost Volley Bears. Who needs anything else, right? You find your Aurora and you find your big guys. You find the best cards that you can possibly hit, and you're guaranteed to hit them. No other fluff. You know, we know that Aurora decks don't like to play 2 drops or 3 drops. Well, this Misfortune deck's just gone one step further and says, I'm only going to play the very best units to hit off Aurora and nothing else at all.
And of course, I should have mentioned prior when I was going off about Mind Splitter, you also have the Sabotage. So like the hand is getting decimated the entire time while the opponent's playing. So yeah, absolutely remarkable. Volley Bear also with Shield 3. That's a big body to try to get rid of. And when someone is sabotaging your Call of the Weeks, you just want to slam the desk, right? Like it's unbelievable what this deck was able to do. And there were times it looked like it could have potentially won the entire thing, but obviously Alan, being as skilled as he is, was able to find a way to close out the victory. But this deck was nonetheless absolutely fantastic. Now, Irelia, you might be familiar with this deck, my friend, because this third place player was the one who knocked out the best of Teemo. Well, actually, he didn't get knocked out by him, but he did give you a loss, right? Going into the final day 2 rounds. Give me a quick breakdown of how, well, you did discuss that game in particular, but how this deck plays and what you like about it.
This sneaky deckhand is giving me PTSD, Alex. I'm terrified of it in my Power Nexus in a short round 3. No, a big shout out to this guy. Absolutely lovely opponent. They actually gave a shout out to the pod in the winners interview, which was a really nice touch. Really, really lovely guy. There was also, we don't need to talk about the drama anymore. Like, great guy, great player, super fun to play against. I think he said this was his first big tournament, so absolutely incredible result. 3 Boots of Swiftness is outrageous. That's a lot of Boots of Swiftness. But this is just like valuing that consistency. This is them saying, like, this is a card I want to find every single game, and I accept that it's just going to be a brick in my hand if I draw 2, which I think is quite reasonable. I really like the Stellarcorn Herder. The other loss I took to Irelia in round 2, I got absolutely cooked by Draven and Charms. My opponent scored, I think, 3 points off 1 Draven by just charming me and absolutely cooked me. So really deadly combo. I also like the one-off Zhonya's Hourglass. Like, I had some factory recalls in my deck to maybe try and counter Guardian Angel, but I had no chance if there's a Guardian Angel and the Hourglass down at the same time as well. It looks just really clean, Alex. Like, there's not a single thing in this deck which I don't like. I think that the 3 Boots of Swiftness is like the one thing which raises eyebrows, but it's a very conscious choice to really value that card. So I absolutely love the list, and the opponent was just a joy to play with. So big congratulations to them.
Yeah, a remarkable result. And I've talked about it before, but top 4 Viktor, right? Top 4 Viktor. And for the record, I'm going a little quicker through these because it is like, what, 1:30 a.m. for you, Joe? I don't, it's getting pretty late there. Joe's looking like he's about to black out. But Viktor, this was one of the decks that really stood out to me. I loved watching this play. Ghoster Driver did a remarkable job. And so much control, and this has been very consistent for Viktor. You do have the Bellows Breath Imperial Decree combination. You have the Singularities, the Wages of Pain. You have a lot of opportunities to basically control the board state. And this deck was great. And I really do think that if it wasn't for some of the Mind Splitter Sabotage shenanigans in the matchup in particular, this could have potentially even, gotten into the final bracket there. What are your thoughts on this list? I thought it was remarkable. And Riptide Rex, by the way, I got to tell you, in play, Riptide Rex was actually ripping it. No pun intended. And this is a card I remember in one of our first episodes, You talked about liking Riptide Rex, and here we are in Bologna, Riptide Rex actually seeing some play and some value.
Yeah, so awesome card. It's kind of comparable to Singularity, right? Like Singularity tends to get the edge because rather than the body, you get the extra bit of removal, but there's definitely going to be some matchups the Rex is better. I love like the 2-1 split, right? 2 Singularities, 1 Rex. They're both good and better in specific situations, but probably Singularity is better on average. My favorite thing about the deck, Alex, is my favorite card of my weekend, which is the triple pickpocket in the main deck. That is such a... I mean, I can't call it a Chad play because I did the same thing myself, but like it's a card which you look at and it's a sideboard card, right? You bring it in off the sideboard. Nah. But then you realize, no, you just play it in the main deck because gold's everywhere, seals are everywhere. And this card is just so good in so many spots. So a lot of these Viktor decks, we saw like 0 unit, just pure spells. I think that this looks like a much better approach where you have the vast majority being spells, but you've got like a fair chunk of units, and pickpocket is like that disruption tool. It is really good. Lux also impressed me this weekend, Alex, I've got to say, with like the 7-cost Vanguard Armory Jace combo. I don't know how high Lux finished in the end, but I was quite impressed by Lux in my games over the weekend. And yeah, I think Viktor's just got great tools like this Imperial Decree Bellows Breath combo, which Lux can also do. But yeah, not surprised to see Viktor just being the better way to go really with that legend ability.
And not just that, like you talk about Bellow's Breath and Imperial Decree, but sometimes Imperial Decree and just tons of tokens, right?
Yes.
Like sometimes that's just enough as well, which is awesome. And if you're getting in a big attack and you have tokens defending, you're able to play Imperial Decree as an action, and then all of a sudden assign that damage and then just wipe out your opponent's attack, which is awesome, right? Excellent list. I love it. And then we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Prismaticism coming in with Draven, the top performing Draven, finishing top 8. There was a couple top 8s. This was the highest performing deck. Very talented player. Last time, I believe, in Houston, played Teemo. Teemo. So I'd love to see what they think about your rendition of Teemo, because there are 3 Nocturnes in this Draven deck. I know you like that, so why don't you give us your take on this?
That's a classy pick. Nocturne's so good. Like, this is what makes me really happy, is that like I'm seeing like these brilliant decks do so well, and they've sort of come to the same conclusions I did, which is Pickpocket's unbelievable and Nocturne's unbelievable. Like Nocturne is just an absolutely absurd card. I actually got to have a game at the airport against Lothar, who's another YouTube creator, and he was playing Miracle Draven with Nocturne. And I hadn't actually seen the top 8 lists were playing Nocturne at that point. And as soon as he like summoned the Nocturne out, I was like, okay, now you have like my full deck building respect, because Nocturne is just such a good card. It's just absolutely bonkers good. I've always been surprised when these decks which are playing called shots and stack decks aren't playing Nocturne. And honestly, this deck absolutely terrifies me. This is probably in a vacuum like the most broken deck in the game, I would say. But it maybe just struggles into Ezreal, for example, right? Like you can sort of target this matchup in a way with like heavier control. But I would say like in a vacuum, this is like the most busted deck we've probably ever had in Riftbound. It can just do some unbelievably gross things, like bushwhack into Rasa the Sunderer. You play 3 Rasa the Sunderers, they all come in ready. You play cool shots and stack decks in your opponent's turn, and you summon out Nocturnes. You play battering rams for 1. Like, my goodness, you need to have a game plan to deal with this, because it's going to absolutely cook you if not.
Yeah, fantastic deck and a fantastic weekend in Bologna. Now, Joe, I got to ask, let's say you're going to Vegas, or let's say you're going to a Summoner Skirmish, and you want to get a metal card from Vegas or whatever else is coming up, and you're a Teemo gamer, and you want to learn how to play Teemo even better. Is there a place where someone can learn from the master, the best Teemo in EU? Joe, if we want some coaching, where do we go?
Yeah, I set up a Metafy page. I used to have one. It was kind of dormant, but I decided to go back to Metafy and have like everything in one place. So I am offering coaching. There's going to be also a Teemo guide. I'll be sure to post like a Teemo YouTube deck guide as well, but then I'll do like a super duper in-depth one for Metafy supporters and things like that. So yeah, the link will be in the description. And I just want to say, guys, like the biggest shout out to Alex. Like he's given me so much support and encouragement. He really inspired me with the Teemo. Like we're the Teemo guys, right? So I wanted to bring the Teemo home. He's put so much work into this pod behind the scenes, and he's supported me so much. So like, he's just a joy to work with. And I honestly, like last week I was having a bad week, finished filming the podcast, and like I just had a smile on my face because I just got to talk Riftbound with Alex. So this one was not just for me. This was for the pod. This was for all the Teemo believers. And I really appreciate everyone's support. So thank you guys.
That means a lot to me, buddy. Actually, it brings a tear to my eye, and it just pulls on my heartstrings because, for me watching you perform at that level, and I know how hard you worked for it, it was amazing to see because I know how much effort you put in to winning that medal card, dude. You absolutely deserve it. And as I said, guys, if you want to learn from the master himself, the links will be in the pinned comment and in the description down below. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate each and every one of you. If you got to the end here, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you aren't already. It means a lot for us, especially as a relatively new podcast. Every like and every sub makes a tremendous difference. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on that next one.